Good morning. It's so lovely to be joining you online. My name is Beks Korniej. Some of you will know me from joint services with St Andrews or from my involvement with the Excite Youth Services that you used to run at the Beks Korniej Baptist Church. I work for Christian Youth Outreach in Colchester as chaplain to the two Colchester colleges, where I've had the privilege of meeting several of the young people for whom Beks Korniej Baptist Church has played a great part in their faith journey. So I feel like I'm sharing today with friends. Beth said I could preach on whatever I liked. So following an Anglican tradition, I looked at the lectionary, and today's readings were really helpful. Isaiah 40 and Psalm 147 are quite possibly familiar passages to some, but it's often good to be reminded and reflect on familiar things, especially when the way we're experiencing the world seems quite unfamiliar in so many ways. Keeping connected with friends has been a real challenge over the last year and got me reflecting on what kind of person I am and how I keep connected within my relationship with my friends and family and with God, even at times when I don't feel much like doing anything. And these passages have helped me reflect afresh on these relationships. I like A.A. Milne's Winnie the Pooh characters, particularly Pooh Bear's friends. You'll probably remember there's Tigger, the extrovert, bouncy, fun-loving, ever-optimistic tiger, Eeyore, the more introvert, quiet, sometimes seemingly depressed donkey, and Piglet, the kind, gentle, often selfless encourager and companion. I think at different times over the past year, I've been a bit like all three of those characters, and I can imagine you may have too. Perhaps joyful and excited back in August, when the restrictions were eased and we were encouraged to eat out to help out. Perhaps fed up and frustrated with being stuck in or not being able to visit the people we love. Or perhaps gently coming alongside people and journeying with them non-judgmentally in whatever they're going through. Whatever it's been like for you, we'll all have experienced the last year differently, even though we've all shared the experience of living with the threat of coronavirus. So what's Winnie the Pooh's friends and how we've lived through the last year got to do with Isaiah 40 and Psalm 147? Well, Isaiah 40 verses 21 to 31 have been described as some of the most beautiful poetry in the Bible. It was probably written at the end of the Babylonian exile, about 540 years before Christ. And Psalm 147 would have been written at a similar time. The people of Israel had been in exile a long time. Historians and scholars suggest the exile was somewhere between 50 to 70 years. We'd perhaps call them prisoners of war today. The older people would have memories and told stories of how life used to be, remembering the days back when they were free to go to worship in Jerusalem, in the temple. For others, they would have only heard stories about what it was like, would have no memories. Being in exile would have been the norm for them. They may well even have been born in exile. Different people would have experienced exile in many different ways. Some may have been in the royal courts serving the Babylonian monarchy. Others may have been in labour camps. Others may have been more like slaves to households or serving the Babylonian aristocracy. And of course, every household would have been slightly different. Life went on, and over the passage of time, their experiences changed. So living in exile became their normal. For some, the experience would have been much more pleasant than for others. In whatever way they experienced it, in the beginning, they were all experiencing something that they didn't want to. and something that they had limited control over. Not that the coronavirus is quite like a 50 to 70 year exile, although I've heard it called an exile. We are all experiencing lockdown and have limited control over it, and we're all experiencing it in our own way, with our personal and family circumstances, which may be vastly different from that of other people around us. And there's so many things that we can take encouragement from in what Isaiah and the psalmists say. But there are three general areas I'd like to share about from these passages. The first is they help us recognise who God is and his amazing power. The second is they help us recognise our own limitations and what God thinks about them. And thirdly, they provide encouragement for us as we put our hope in the Lord. The psalmist reminds us how amazing God is in verses 3 to 4. It says he heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. He determines the number of stars and calls them by name. The same God who heals our broken hearts and binds up our wounds determines the immenseness of the universe and knows each star by name. I wanted to put that into some perspective, so I got a bit geeky and looked on Google at how many stars there were. It's really worth a look. But just to give you an idea, we know there's loads, and there's about apparently 3,000 stars visible to the eye on a clear moonlit night. If the stars were people, that would be 6 times the population of Ramsey School, and God knowing each of them by name. But there's more stars than those we can see with the naked eye. About 100,000 stars apparently can be seen through a small telescope. So that's about Colchester Football Stadium to capacity 10 times, and knowing each of the people by name. Then there's an estimated 100 million stars in our galaxy. That's one with 11 zeros after it. And God, if they were people, knows each of them by name, but he knows each of the stars by name. And then it tells me an estimated 100 billion galaxies. And each of those may have an average of 100 billion stars. So it's a huge, huge number, and Google tells me it's something like 10 billion trillion stars, which is one with 22 zeros after. What an amazing universe. It's beyond our human comprehension. And those are just the stars that apparently are observable to us. There's also got to be the things that are beyond anything we humans can comprehend or see with all our technology and science. But the same God who knows the name of every single one of those stars heals our individual broken hearts and binds up our wounds. How awesome is that? Isaiah also challenges the people in a similar way to remember who God is. It might challenge us too. The passage goes, "Lift up your eyes and look to the heavens. Who created all these? He who brings out the starry hosts one by one and calls forth each of them by name. Because of his great power and mighty strength, not one of them is missing. Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary, and his understanding no one can fathom." Our amazing human comprehension and power of analysis and understanding can only just begin to comprehend how awesome God is. And yet, even with that unfathomable, infinite knowledge and understanding, God knows us. Secondly, God recognises our limitations and is still with us and loves us and wants good for us. As Isaiah says, he gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall. But the psalmist says, great is our Lord, and mighty in power. His understanding has no limit. God knows we will get tired and weary. It doesn't surprise him. And God knows we'll have days when we're a bit more like Winnie the Pooh's friend Eeyore, when we're feeling low and depressed. But he still loves us. Whether we're young or old, he is with us when we're tired and weary. However we're feeling, he might bring people like Piglet alongside us to just be there, to sit with us, to call us, to FaceTime us. He might want us to be like Piglet with other people around us. He might want us to sit and lament with our friends who have lost loved ones, or as we struggle to homeschool, or the pain and frustrations of not being able to hug our grandchildren, or whatever it is. He may also not bring others alongside us, but in all of that, he is there and he understands. He understands how we're feeling and why we're feeling the way we are, and he loves us the same. He gives strength to the weary and he increases the power of the weak. But God understands because his understanding, unlike ours, has no limits. Isn't it reassuring that even when we're having our worst days, God is still with us? That we don't have to pretend, that we can lament and he understands, that we can get upset or angry and he understands, that we can feel like the world around us is falling apart and he understands, and he loves us, and he is with us, and he will renew our strength. Then my third point is made both in Isaiah and the psalmist. But our amazing, awesome God, he wants to encourage us. Psalm 147 is the Lord delights in those who fear him and put their hope in his unfailing love. The fear that the psalmist is talking about there is not the fear of pain or danger, but there's another kind of fear, and it is that awe and reverence and wonder and amazement and gratitude and admiration and worship. I think it's this second kind of fear that the psalmist is talking about. The Lord delights in those who stand in awe and wonder and admiration and worship him, and those who hope in his unfailing love. And as Isaiah said, but those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. Both Isaiah and the psalmist want to encourage us that as we stand in awe of our God, he will renew our strength. The closing metaphor that they will soar on wings like eagles is often used as an encouragement and a favourite verse of many. It may have reminded the people in exile of what happened earlier in their history in the Exodus as they escaped Egypt many centuries before, where in Exodus it says, You have seen what I did to the Egyptians and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. From age to age, God hears the cry of his people and empowers them. In exhaustion, in oppression, in other moments of greatest need. In some ways, Isaiah goes beyond the Exodus account, in that God not only protects the people with his wings, he gives them wings of their own. They will soar on wings like eagles. And we have that same hope today. So to draw to a close, how can we practically apply this day to day? Perhaps we're feeling exhausted or heartbroken or just about surviving. We can renew our sense of awe and hope in God. One of the things I encourage young people to do is an appreciation practice. Take time each day to think of 10 things you appreciate or are thankful for. A bit like counting your blessings. We can praise God even if we're feeling sad, as we don't need to feel happy to express our praise. Happiness is a feeling, but appreciation is a choice. Although we may not feel happy, starting to develop an attitude of appreciation can help us feel more content with our circumstances. The Christian author Evelyn Underhill wrote, "Beauty is simply reality seen with eyes of love." And although currently it may seem difficult or even impossible to appreciate what's going on, if we look at things with appreciation and possibly even love, we can see the reality of the present moment differently and perhaps even as beautiful, and we can praise our awesome God for those things. So may I encourage you to remember who God is. And as the old chorus said, count your blessings, name them one by one. And whether you're feeling more like Tigger or Eel or Piglet, may you know that God sees you, loves you and is with you. Whatever kind of lockdown experience you're having, he wants you to have your strength renewed, for you to soar on wings like eagles, to run the race that he has set for you, one day at a time. God bless you.